My name is Haley.
I'm Sid.
Adele.
Leah. And Wendy.
We decided to do Filipino culture because Adele is Filipino. Today we're just going to go into how Filipino culture is influenced with healthcare decisions.
The official languages of the Philippines is English and Tagalog. Tagalog is one of the many dialects that the Philippines has, but Tagalog is the most commonly used dialect. Majority of Filipinos know how to speak, read, and write in English because it was taught in schools, so a first-generation Filipino would be able to understand and communicate in basic English to you. And if you were to hear a Filipino person talking in Tagalog, you would hear that some words are very similar to Spanish words. The way that Filipinos communicate is indirectly. They avoid sounding harsh because they are just overly nice. They don't want to come off too assertive, just don't want to disturb or to cause any conflict between whoever they're communicating with. Filipinos are also very attentive to their own posture, the way that they're expressing themselves, but they are also attentive to the person that they're communicating with. They may hesitate whenever they're saying no or just answering certain questions. Filipinos speak indirectly to avoid hiya, and hiya is embarrassment or humiliation, and they're avoiding that for themselves, for whoever they're talking to. Filipinos also use a formal style of speech, so their sentences will end in po if addressing someone older or of a higher status. When saying yes, they say opo instead of oo. When it comes to physical contact, Filipinos like to walk hand in hand or arm in arm with their relatives or their friends, usually see that in public. For couples, you rarely or never see any PDA of some sort. Filipinos love to laugh. They are so loud. That indicates happiness or just relieving the tension. A big characteristic of Filipino gestures is pointing with their lips, as you can see in the GIF. They like to point with their lips just to an object or a direction. In our research, we saw that Filipinos view hands on hips as a sign of anger. For me, in my culture, I've never seen that. But when it comes to getting someone's attention, you always see a Filipino be like, psst, and they call you over like this.
Now, Filipinos, when they are in social situations with people that they are familiar with and close family, friends, they'll use intimate and personal distance and stand and conversate at arm's length. With strangers, it's a little bit different. They do use social distance and they're comfortable with more distance, and they're normally forced into intimate distance in city life when they're walking around because of how many people live in the Philippines.
The Filipino culture typically practices a collective society, which means that the family needs are prioritized over the individual needs. They also practice a hierarchical structure where the elders and their community and families are presented with a lot of respect and value. An important social media or networking that they utilize is Facebook, which is how they receive relevant information or receive their news or any sort of things like that.
The Filipino society, their perception of time, they view time as a linear progression of events. There are two main religions within the Philippines, which are Catholics and Muslims. Catholic is the main religion. They believe in the afterlife, and then outer provinces believe in the reincarnation of their ancestors. They perceive life through the lens of Bahala Na, which is come what may, basically saying that the passage of time is not up to mortals, it is up to God. The society itself is a shorter term outlook, so they look at things as we're not going to plan too far in advance, and they're not over concerned about saving money for their future. They have a relaxed attitude of timekeeping. They normally are about 10 to 30 minutes late to set events if it is a social event. If it's in a business event, it's a little bit different. They like to create relationships with each other first, and then they kind of go into the less planned out meetings. So they normally, for social engagements, they don't arrive right at the time because punctuality normally seems as though they're being pushy or overconfident. But for business engagements, the punctuality is preferred. They do take time to socialize before and after the event to make sure that everyone is getting to know each other. So small talk is better when people speak in lengths versus they feel that shorter sentences and shorter replies are constructed as discourteous.
One thing that helps a Filipino family function is filial piety. This is when children demonstrate gratitude towards their parents for how they provided for them, as well as by respecting them and their parents' values. This helps prevent bringing hiya upon their family, which can be translated to shame or embarrassment, which is considered a very dishonorable thing to do in Filipino culture. In the Filipino family is considered to be a matriarch. In this system, the mother is the head of the household and she's in charge of the family's finances, but she also takes care of things like the children, cooking, and doing chores around the house. The father is there to support the family and make sure that they have everything that they need, and children are there to help their mother with chores, and in doing so, it helps them learn about responsibility. Family plays a major role in Filipino culture. As a result, it's expected that the needs of the family will be put first. Another major expectation is that all elders will be respected and their opinions will be highly valued. The primary religion in the Philippines is Christianity, specifically Catholicism. Catholicism was introduced into the Philippines during the Spanish colonization of the island, where the Spanish would send missionaries to the island to teach people about Christianity. This instilled some values into the people, like the sanctity of life, as well as the respect for hierarchy in the church, by respecting the Pope, as well as in their families and making sure they're respecting their parents and elders. One religious practice that these people have is they're called fiestas. So every town has these once a year, and they pay homage to patron saints and essentially throw a big party. Islam is the second most popular religion in the Philippines. It's mostly practiced by Sunni Muslims in the southernmost islands of the Philippines. Here, Muslim communities are called Moros, where they hold traditional Muslim values such as kindness, forgiveness, honesty, and charity. However, many of the religious practices vary based on which island you go to.
Traditional and basic Filipino diet consists of rice and fish. Typically, Filipino families embrace the eating together where everyone eats the same meal, shares that intimate time together, and just enjoys that family time. And again, they usually have a hearty meal together, which almost every meal does include rice. Filipino Americans who have been more acculturated to the American health system typically tend to use the Western medicine practice, as opposed to those who immigrated later on in life. They tend to stick to the alternative medicine route, and typically what that does is that they'll self-diagnose. That prevents them from seeking medical care sooner than necessary, which also causes great concern for healthcare providers when the illness is already at an advanced stage, leading to missed opportunities to optimal treatment.
The top 3 common illnesses when it comes to Filipinos is cardiovascular disease, malignancy, and stroke. These mainly come from most Filipinos having high blood pressure. The culture in certain areas of the Philippines has normalized heavy drinking, smoking a lot, not really caring about their diet, so that leads to a lot of Filipinos having diabetes as well.
For Filipinos, they have a view of holistic healthcare, balance and harmony between mind, body, and environment. The rural areas of the Philippines, they are more into home remedies, traditional healing techniques, and supernatural elements, versus urban healthcare is more westernized and they do over-the-counter medications. Most of the people who migrate to the United States later in life, they kind of self-diagnose, self-medicate, seek alternative therapies, which that's very important to know when you are treating someone who may have grown up in the Philippines, because they are going to be less likely to come to the doctor when they need to, and they'll only come when it's kind of a life or death situation for them.
I included the employment rate of Filipino Americans in the U.S., with 67% being employed, 3% unemployed, and 30% not in the labor force, as well as the median annual household income, which is $90,400, U.S.-born being $87,000, and foreign-born being $93,200. And the level of education is linked to disparities in employment because it affects the type of work that people do, the working conditions, and their personal experiences, and the income that they earn. The bar graph shows educational attainment of the Filipino population in the U.S., and as you can see, a large portion of the group received high school or less level of education, which can overall affect the health education of the group. It's reported that 7% of the Filipino American population are living in poverty, and for health access and quality, there's a higher prevalence of chronic diseases when compared to other groups, and they have higher mortality rates due to cardiovascular disease and diabetes, as well as they're more likely to have hypertension, most likely because of the behavioral risk factors. And the reported rates of hypertension, high cholesterol, and diabetes suggest that lifestyle interventions targeting diet and health education are needed within the population. To make sure you're remaining culturally congruent when working with the Filipino American population, you can make sure to social distance for the client's comfort, use indirect communication such as attentive posture and expression, be aware of some of their signs of anger. They tend to put family needs above personal, and I think this can be very important when working through nursing care plans, and just remembering that they may want their family's decision to weigh in. And they tend to self-diagnose, self-medicate, and use home remedies, and I think this can be very important when getting the client's history.